This week's programme comes from Brandon Marsh Nature Reserve near Coventry, one of 3 sites being sponsored by Carlton Television in its year of promise. Now, the place is overrun with aliens of one sort or another. Rabbits, of course, which were brought here by the Romans. Thank you very much, Julius Caesar. Canada geese, don't know who was responsible for those. And can you believe mink?
Here's a footprint of mink. They've been in this area just in the last few hours.
That's as recent as that, is it?
I'm sure it is, with the rain we've had.
And how much of a problem are they here? Because there are different views about mink.
Well, one thing we don't have here is waterfowl, and almost certainly the mink have led to the destruction of waterfoals here. They certainly take a lot of birds' eggs, young birds as well, and really do have a major impact on our native wildlife.
Another foreigner who seems determined to colonise the UK is the tree rat, otherwise known as the squirrel. Did you know it comes in 4 different colours? Red, grey, black and white. But only one of them belongs here.
I've come to a little town in Missouri, USA, called Marionville, to trace the history of the grey squirrel, which has dominated the English landscape since it was introduced back in Victorian times. But in doing so, I've come across a third pigmentation. The English blacks are confined to pockets of the Chilterns, but have been reported as far afield as Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire. For some strange reason, they don't travel well, so the population clings to a relatively tiny acreage.
As we've seen in the grey squirrels, their fur is actually a combination of white, brown and black, which gives the grey coloration above and the white underneath. But in the black or melanic varieties, there's an overproduction of the pigment melanin, which masks all the lighter colours, so they appear black.
3,000 miles away, an almost identical and equally mysterious situation. Marionville, a few hundred miles from Kansas City, is one of only 3 American towns where the white squirrel is king. I went to see the old sheriff, Clint Wise, who lives in Squirrel Hollow, a Gothic hotel straight out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie where white squirrel fanatics come to stay.
Since I have the bed and breakfast, the furthest away we've had people was Nairobi, Kenya.
Really?
Yes, sir.
What, come to see the squirrels?
Come to see the squirrels, yes, sir.
Clint's own video footage whetted our appetites, but the white are much more nervous than the black, and you have to catch them at dawn or dusk.
The thing that I don't understand is that they don't migrate into these other cities, the nearby towns and everything. They just seem to stay here.
So 5 a.m. it was at Jim's Ponderosa, and the sweet corn did us proud.
The Lions Club has built 500 den boxes out of redwood and installed them, and had various promotions and encourage people to feed them, and their population has increased quite a bit.
The word is that they arrived in Marionville with a travelling circus around 1865 and decided to stay. Well, it makes a good story. Well, there's plenty of food for him, isn't there?
There certainly is. I mean, autumn is obviously the best time of the year, and as you can see, he's collecting nuts and taking them away and burying them.
But don't go thinking that the white, the black and the grey are different species. It's the same squirrel in a different coat. And it may be that mating between the black and the white in the USA produced the grey in the first place. At a government research laboratory, which I'm not allowed to identify, men in white coats have tried to breed red squirrels from species captured in Cannock Chase and on the Isle of Wight. So far, without conspicuous success. It's hard to beat nature at its own game. 100 years ago, reds were a common sight in the woodlands of Middle England. They'd been here since the Ice Age, but if you saw one today, they'd wonder what you were on. They were plentiful in the Wyre Forest, Charnwood Forest, the Forest of Dean, and wooded parts of Shropshire and Derbyshire. But only 158,000 are left in the whole of Britain today, and in another 10 years, they might be extinct. So imagine how fortunate they are on the west coast of England, where the red squirrel is as common as the household cat, and just as tame.
Not much will put them off. They'll appear even in the depths of winter. A lot of people think they hibernate, but they certainly don't. They're out feeding most days, however cold it is, however wet. The only thing they don't like is hot sunshine. That's when they get back up in the drays and go to sleep for the siesta. If we're to provide for the long-term future of the red squirrels, it is vitally important that the greys don't become established here. We need to ensure that the greys don't bring diseases such as parapox virus into the red squirrel population. That's the main risk, really. It's contact. We're not saying that we want to, exterminate grey squirrels over a wide area. We just want to make sure that there's a sufficient buffer around these pine woods to ensure that the reds are able to survive. The grey squirrel is a very robust animal too, and it will breed at a higher density within similar woodland. And ultimately, food competition is going to be one of the main mechanisms by which the red loses out to its American grey cousin.
So how do we redress the balance? Birth control is the latest method. By introducing chemicals into their food, research laboratories are hoping to sterilise the alien grey.
We do have to manage our native or alien species, and so this is a new method which, if it works, will be very much more humane than using culling techniques such as poisoning.
The ranger in this location in the Lake District has only seen 3 grey squirrels, and each of them met a sticky end. That's how it has to be if the red is ever to be seen in the Midlands again. The last sighting was in Derbyshire's Derwent Valley in 1990. Who knows if he'll ever be back?
With rage and hate the astonished grave alarms and hurls her infants from its frantic arms. So wrote Erasmus Darwin, who was trying to describe the actions of the Himalayan balsam, a vigorous water-loving weed brought back to this country by Victorian plant hunters. I wonder if they realised that by bringing home their exotic seeds and cuttings, they would be endangering their own beloved British plants, the bluebell, the cowslip and the marsh marigold.
It's not native, and it is the one plant that's completely smothering the site. If you have a look at where it's growing, as we remove it, there's nothing growing underneath it at all. Whereas if you look amongst the nettles and the cleavers and the other plants, we have got all these other unusual plants growing.
The Worcestershire Wildlife Trust has organised a balsam bashing party to finally get rid of this triffid-like weed.
This is a lovely piece of land and it's got some wild orchids growing here, and it's such a shame that we can't see the orchids because this is taking over everything else. So yeah. I think once it's cleared it'll give everything else a chance, really. We're
throwing it on top of some branches so the roots aren't touching the soil. If we did throw it just on the ground it would root again and then it would grow back and flower and seed. But by lifting it up it should just rot down.
But not everyone feels so spiteful towards it. In fact, it has a very proactive fan club, led by one Oxfordshire gardener.
So what's all this about you sprinkling these seeds wantonly through the countryside, Margot?
Well, I just like the look of them.
You have been known to sprinkle seeds.
I think they're pretty. I read about a lady once who went by train a lot, and she took hands full of seeds, of all sorts of seeds, and threw them out the window. Right. I thought that was really rather a good idea.
Margot initially thought the flower was an orchid, but discovering it was a commoner didn't seem to dampen her enthusiasm.
So you give them to all your friends?
I do, yes.
They don't think they're a problem, do they?
No, nobody's found that they're a problem. They all like them.
So one half of the country is ripping them out by the roots, while the other half is spreading the seed. What's going on?
In a garden, as we've seen, they're perfectly appropriate, and that's why they were introduced in the 1800s, brought from the Himalayas as a garden plant. But then, of course, people are introducing them to the wild because they love them so much, but they maybe don't realise the potential damage that's being done.
OK, so it does take over just a little bit. But isn't it absolutely beautiful? And if it's looking slightly familiar, that's because it's a member of the Impatiens family. Yes, it's a giant busy Lizzie.
The Himalayan balsam needs lots of water, and there's nothing it likes more than a thriving riverbank where it can hurl its seeds into the current to colonise the next 100 yards or so. It may make for a pretty landscape when the flowers are out from June to September, but the waxy smell it gives off can have some nasty side effects.
I had several people had written to me saying that they had actually been almost overcome. One lady actually collapsed due to the smell of the plant and was poorly for several days afterwards. One of the kids' names is Stinky Pops, so the seeds pop and the plant stinks.
Yes.
And they love them.
So this is really annoying. It's Mr. Noise's exploding plant. Touch its seed pods and they explode.
They explode, yes.
How sensible. And this is the Birmingham Botanical Gardens selling this
Yeah.
and encouraging people to let loose Himalayan balsam.
I mean, I can see why kids like it, I can see why people buy it, but I think what we'd say is please don't.
Yes.
And certainly if you get these, don't release them into the countryside because you're going to be causing a huge amount of damage and a lot of work for all these hard-working people that we've got here on the side.
So the dangers of alien species colonising our landscape aren't fully appreciated by all. And the more attractive the interloper, the harder it is to accept the truth.
What we've been trying to say to conservationists and other ecologists is that they need to understand what people think about these and the sort of role of people in spreading them, because if we don't understand that, the conservationists haven't got any hope of controlling them at all.
For details of people and places featured in this programme, write for a Heart of the Country fact sheet to P.O. Box 96, Birmingham B1 2JL.